Welcome to part 1 of my bedroom built-ins. This video covers building the drawer inserts from the left side drawer as well as the center drawer inserts underneath the bench. I wanted to reduce as much tear out as possible, so I put a higher tooth 12-inch blade in my miter saw as well as a zero clearance insert I made out of walnut. I also have a quick disconnect attachment on my vacuum system that I share between the miter saw and the blade guard vacuum port on my table saw. I'll have some more videos later on showing some modifications I plan on making to my distribution line in the ceiling, but for now it gets the job done. I first start out by cutting down all my plywood to size for the front, back, and side walls of the drawer inserts. A stop block works great here, keeping all pieces consistent, especially when having square drawer inserts. It's crucial. The front and back walls of the drawer insert will have joinery details called a rabbet milled into the edges of the plywood. This joint will give the drawer insert more strength than just a butt joint will, which is why I opt for it here. Here's my router setup. I'm using a rabbet bit. Now, from the edge of the blade to the bearing is a 1/2 inch, so I'm doing a 1/2 inch depth on the rabbet, and then I set up the mag shims so that that's a 1/4 inch right there, 1/4 inch height, so I'm doing a 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch on these drawer inserts, so that's what it ends up looking like, 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch. Okay, so now that the rabbets are complete, this is what it's going to look like. So 2 of the sides that have the rabbets are going to be on either side, and then pieces that have no rabbets on them are going to come in on the left and right sides here and here. Ultimately, this is what the box is going to look like. Now for the bottom of the box, we're going to put another little groove on the bottom edge of all 4 pieces, and we're going to have a 1/4 inch piece of material slide into the bottom groove that we put in, and that's going to make a nice complete box that has a seamless bottom. It's a really easy way to make a drawer, and you can do that right on the table saw like I'm going to show you right now. And at this point in time, before you put the slot in at the bottom of your drawers, you want to identify what the bottom part of your drawer is going to be. So on all my pieces, I put an arrow, and that arrow indicates where my bottom slot is going to run across. For example, I picked this one because I had the little notch in it from a routing mistake that I made. So it's perfect to have that as the bottom. It's going to hide that imperfection, and you'll never even know it. Okay, so depth of cut for these slots is very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my depth a 1/4 inch, okay? And then I'm going to use the mag shim to determine the blade height on that 1/4 inch. So the red is a 1/4 inch, and the blade needs to clear under that silver piece. So I'm going to lower my blade so that it just fits underneath, okay? And then I'm going to raise my blade. So I see that mag shim want to raise. I'll exaggerate it a little bit. So see that mag shim raise up. I'm going to go all the way down until I don't see it raise anymore. And that's when I know I'm set for a 1/4 inch depth. Now I can make a sacrificial cut to check that depth on a scrap piece. And if I like it, I will cut all the rest of my pieces here for the drawers. Depending on the plywood and the blade you're using, you may need to take an additional pass on the table saw to have a slot wide enough to accept the plywood material you're using. Now, I do own a dado blade, but for these drawer bases, I'm just using my standard table saw blade and moving the blade over on every pass. Slots cut in the plywood on those drawer sides, and here is my drawer bottom, like that, and you can see that fit is real nice, and once I put glue in there, that will never come out ever again. So best way to make drawer bottoms seamless and professional. The box setup with the rabbits, there we go, and then that groove in the bottom all the way around, and it's perfectly consistent because I cut them all at the same time. So that drawer base right here, that 1/4-inch drawer base, should slide right in there. You slide it in and then you glue everything up, and that will be my inserts for my drawers. When assembling everything together, you can glue the bottom of the drawer in or keep it floating and just glue your sides together. I'm using a pin nailer here to keep the drawer inserts together while the glue dries. Lots of personal preference. Some people use clamps, some people use glue, some people use a combo of all the above. So when I was in the Home Depot parking lot, I used my skill saw to rip this to 31 1/4, and my true measurement is 31. So now what I do is I take my factory edge, I use my factory edge, run that along the fence, and then I rip the cut side that I did on the skill saw in Home Depot's parking lot, clean that up, a little bit of scrap left over, but then this was more manageable in my car, and I'm able to trim it down in the shop without having to lug that huge 4x8 sheet around. Much easier this way. For the next 3 drawers, the bottoms are going to be 1/2-inch ply because they're much bigger than the first 3. With that thicker plywood on the bottom, I need a much wider groove. Instead of running multiple passes on a standard table saw blade, I'm going to install my dado blade and take care of all those grooves with one single pass. So what I like to do is I take a sanding block and I just hit that rabbet a little bit. That breaks out any tear out along that edge, because when you're inside on the inside of your box, when that other piece comes up, the sidewall comes up, if you take that down, that tear out down, then you're gonna have a nice clean edge, and it's gonna save you some time. So again, I'm gonna pre-mark where my notch is gonna be. So I'm gonna run a 1/2-inch notch for the base to go in, and I'm going to determine, depending on how my pieces are, what side I want down and what side I want the top of the drawer to be. So I'll go through, and for example, if you look at, I made a mistake on one of these right here. So that is a mistake with a router I made. Now if I turn this over and I make this the bottom piece, well, now that's going to get covered by the groove. You'll never even know that was a mistake. You'll never see it again. Now here's another tip. So I'm always going to have a tear out side to my cut unless it's a brand new saw. So what you want to do is you want to make the tear out side when you're determining what side of the piece you want the outside of your drawer base to be, or what side you want the inside to be. That tear out, if you put it to the outside, it's much easier to sand the box on the outside than if you were to put that tear out on the inside, and then in the box, all that tear out you see right along that edge. It's going to be very difficult to sand there. So by putting it on the outside of the box here, well then it's much easier to sand that up. So on the inside of the drawers, I'm going to be making a 1/2-inch groove. With that 1/2 inch, I can do one pass on my table saw here with a what's called a dado blade set. Now this is a dado blade set by Spider. It's very good. I've used it many times. What you have is your left and right blades, and then your inner blades, which are called chippers. So what we're gonna do is we're going to set up the blade set, and you stack enough of these so that you achieve a 1/2 inch wide cut at whatever depth you want to set. So let's go through that process and I'll show you how that. I'm going to be replacing my throat plate as well, because this is a little bit under 1/2 inch, so I have a different throat plate for this saw specifically for a dado blade set. So here's my dado blade throat plate, and now this width allows me to stack multiple blades. That's probably not supposed to be there. Now instead of buying these types of plates, you can also make your own zero clearance plates by using the original plate the saw comes with. Use that as a template and make yourself a bunch of different throat plates for different widths of the dado blade, like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and you can throw those on, so then you have a zero clearance plate that allows for less chip out and less space in between the blade and the throat plate itself. Very nice to have, especially when you have multiple options for throat plates. Now on a dado blade, the teeth, there's angled teeth for the left and right side. So this angle is facing left, so that is my left side blade. And then on the right side blade, it looks identical, but the angle of the teeth go right instead of left. So you know that this is your right side. And then you're gonna have your chipper, which is a straight blade, right in the middle. Now say this fit when I make this groove in the drawer base is a little too tight. The kit, and all dado kits come with it, come with spacers as well. So you can stick these in between your chippers and make little fine-tune adjustments depending on how tight you want that fit to be. So I set it up for the standard 2 chipper and 2 end plate setup for this dado stack. And that should give me a nice 1/2 inch groove, and we'll see how tight that is. If it's a little too tight, then I will add a spacer from there, but I don't think I'm gonna need to. So the last thing I wanna do is set the height of the blade. So I'm gonna put the mag shim in place, and then I'm going to put the silver plate on top, and I'm going to lower the saw. Now, that is where I wanna be. Right there, when I start to raise that mag shim with the saw's height adjustment, and it starts lifting the mag shim off the table like this, it means I'm too high. So I want to be able to move the mag shim with the blade set at the apex, move the mag shim over, and I should barely brush. So that is set to my quarter inch. And then you want to make sure that you run a test piece through and that you like what you want. Now the last step is how far on the bottom of the base of the drawer do I want this groove to be. I don't have my smaller hose, vacuum hose for the top, because I can't use that attachment with the dado stack. So I'm going to close that one, but I am running my bottom vacuum attachment. So I'm going to keep that one on, and let's make some cuts. This is one side of my drawer. We're gonna glue a bunch of glue in that pocket, although the press fit will be easy enough to be able to pick these up right away, almost immediately. But we put the glue for added security. And I did dry fit this before I put the glue. Always dry fit to make sure everything looks good and works well, because once the glue starts drying, you run out of opportunity to fix any mistakes that come up during the assembly process.